Welcome to Demystifying Mental Health, a show where we are removing the stigmas of mental health and we are debunking myths. I am Dr. Alauna, trauma psychiatrist, and thank you for being here with me because we know that it's time to evolve. So today's show is called SOS, Saving Ourselves from Suicide. And this is a topic that might be sort of triggering. So, as we go through this topic, I may stop periodically. I'll teach you some mindfulness exercises, and you're always welcome to put it on pause or even stop if you need to, because we're going to be talking about some pretty um, intense topics. But hey, as a trauma psychiatrist, I love talking about the things that nobody wants to talk about. When I started talking about this episode, people were like, oh, okay. Well, on that note, I'm like, you come on back here. Come on back here because we need to dive into a topic that's a silent killer and it's an increasingly rapidly growing issue within our communities. And so, suicide is about a complex interplay of emotions, thoughts, and behaviors that lead to what we call suicidal ideation or the desire to die, the desire to end your life. So we need to talk about these things because it's a serious issue and it's usually shrouded in stigma and misunderstanding. And when people go, oh, I don't think we should talk about that. What if we make people suicidal? Well, guess what? It's already happening. It's already happening. We're not you don't make someone suicidal by talking about it. But we do need to shed light on this topic and explore the factors around it because it's prevalent in many communities that in, even personally, as a physician, as an African American person. Uh, Good afternoon, Andrea. How are you? Thank you for joining. So, as we are delving into these experiences, I think it's important for us to understand the science behind the suicidal thoughts and the brain's role in these experiences. And I'm also going to give you strategies and coping techniques. Whether you're here to help yourself or you're here for somebody else, these techniques are the same no matter who you're presented to because this is broken down in terms of how our biology functions. So, together today, we're going to make this a safe space. Do me a favor, make this a safe space. So, wherever you're joining me from, go ahead and just check in with yourself. I'm going to go through a brief exercise. Just this is called a grounding exercise. And these are some of the mindfulness and meditation skills that's important for us to implement as we start working our way towards the trauma cure. So, do me a favor and just kind of center yourself in your seat. Get comfortable, take a few deep breaths. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. If you don't feel comfortable, you can just lower your eyelids just so that you're almost completely closed, and just allow your hands to rest on your lap. And what we're doing right now is called a body scan. I want you to think about yourself from head to toe, and I'm going to walk you through that process. First, I want you to think about your hair at the top of your head. Take a deep breath and direct your attention to your scalp, and then direct your attention to your head, your skull, if you will. Imagine a bright light, a healing light above your head that is slowly descending as you are thinking about each one of these body parts. Think about your ears, your eyebrows, your forehead, your eyes, nose, mouth, and chin. Continue to take those deep breaths as you scan through your neck and shoulders, move down through your arms. As the light descends, it warms those areas and finds those aches and pains and sends some good healing energy to them. Your lungs and your chest and your breast and all of your organs and your abdomen. Send some attention and some love to your hips and your thighs, your knees, your calves, your ankles, and your feet. And as that energy descends through the floor or wherever you're standing or sitting, think about the consistency of the earth holding you up, pressing against you as you press against the earth. Ground yourself in your body because we are going to talk about some very important things today. So, thank you for participating in that mindfulness exercise. That's called a body scan. And those are some of the techniques that I teach as I work with my students. Make sure that you follow me. I'm Dr. Alauna. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. All right. So, moving forward, understanding suicidal thoughts. What are we talking about when we say suicidal? And by definition, we would say that suicide would be the intentional taking of your own life, right? But a lot of times people think that suicide is a mental illness, and suicide is not technically a mental illness. It's not a diagnosis that we write on a paper. It really is a symptom of the pain that the person is feeling. That pain could be psychological pain, that pain could be physical pain, but either way, it goes back to the experience that they're having in their body is generating so much friction, so much pain, so much discomfort that they no longer want to continue to exist in their body the way that it is. Now, as a psychiatrist, I have had a long relationship with this. In psychiatry, suicide is our emergency. Like a heart attack is an emergency in regular medicine, suicide is considered our emergency. And let me give you some statistics on suicide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for African Americans ages 15 to 24. Think about that. Mm, that statistic hurts. Uh, Globally, there is one suicide about every 40 seconds. In the US, there's a suicide about every 13.7 minutes. When we think about when I was working with veterans, I believe the number at the time was 22 suicides a day. And so these are just some of the statistics that we're looking at and some of the circumstances that people are presented with. But let me also say, sometimes your career, there's a lot right now. I'm a physician. We have known that mental health has is very challenged when you're a physician. You're at the interface of people's worst moments in their lives, and you're often supposed to be the person solving all their problems and not supposed to have any problems of your own, right? That's how most people think. So there's a lot of factors and why even certain roles in life put you at a higher risk of suicide. I want to distinguish suicide from self-harm. So that's one of the things that self-harm is like a whole nother conversation. And if you want to have an episode about self-harm, let me know in the chat. You can drop questions also in the chat so I can see it. Hey, Sabrina, thanks for joining us today. And you're welcome to drop where you're joining us from in the chat. And whenever you come to this information, it may be day, night, evening. Have a good one. Make it a good one. Okay, because you have that power. You are a creator. Now, coming back to this, suicidal ideation is far more common than what people like to believe. Okay, let's just keep it real. I'm a psychiatrist. Most of my career, I was in an office and people would come to me, and I'm probably that they wouldn't even tell their pastor some of the stuff that they would tell me. I consider that an honor that and a sacred role to be the person that somebody can come to and tell their real truth. Can't tell their mama, their sister, their brother, their cousin, their daddy, their uncle, nobody. Because if I told them this, they would be telling me all kinds of ways why I shouldn't feel that way, why I shouldn't think that way. And when my patients would tell me they were feeling that way, my job is not to panic. My job is not to freak out. My job is really just to listen and hear them out. And what I actually began to realize is that those statistics that I gave you earlier are massively undercounted, massively underrepresented. How many people walk around like, man, If I I'm trying to screen what I was gonna say because I don't want to say that there was some cuss words in my thing. So y'all know what I mean. F it, right? There's a lot of people who feel that way, may not last all day, may not even ever act on it. But let's keep it real. If you live long enough to really deal with some of the challenges of life, the disappointments, the bullying, the I mean, look at our society. There is no demographic that is escaping the mess that we are having right now. You can't be you're not rich enough to get away from the issues and the traumas that are coming about because of climate change and ignoring our contribution to the environment, the things that come from us believing that there's multiple races somehow, this delusional belief that there something exists other than one human race has caused us to be tribal and abusive to each other in a way that's causing trauma after trauma after trauma. Um, it's not uncommon for somebody to have a financial loss or relationship loss or a job loss or any kind of loss and think, you know what? I don't even know if I want to do this anymore, man. I don't even know if I feel like continuing on this hurts too bad, if I'm feeling a lot, or I'm so numb because of all the things that are going on that I don't feel anything, which is also a very miserable experience. So when we think about why it's so taboo to talk about this, before I go forward, I want to ask you a question. And you don't have to answer this out loud. You can just think about it. Um, but I want you to answer it because you need to know the answer. Have you ever been in a position or a situation where you have felt like ending your own life? You don't even have to type it in the chat. Okay. Be honest with yourself. There's nobody else there in your brain but you. Now, you may be here thinking like, I would never feel that way. I don't no. And that's fine. But I just want you to identify where you are on that calendar. And so now that you know the answer to that, whether you hear for yourself or for somebody else, today we're going to use some empathy to take the role, the other person's role, the other experience, because that is how, simply by understanding the concept of empathy, how we will be able to be better interventionalists, even if you are thinking to yourself, I would never. And that's fine. But you probably know somebody who has. In fact, I know you do. They just wouldn't tell you because if they did, you might come off kind of judgmental. I'm just saying. If you don't allow yourself to get it, you won't be able to be useful for that person who needs you in that moment. To not try to tell them that they should feel differently, but to approach this with more empathy and more awareness of how common suicidal thoughts can be and why they're not necessarily an emergency unless the person is actively about to harm themselves. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later about the layers of what we should be looking for. But most importantly, we have to start by understanding that suicidal thoughts are I mean, think about how many stressful things people go through and how many times psychologically people are getting hit by things in their life. And so when these instances occur, we have a tendency to go, oh, well, they're just saying something for attention. Like, how do we recognize the difference between when somebody is just talking and making statements versus somebody who actually is going to act on it? So here's some of the ways that I would look at that and to answer that question. First of all, we live in a society that death is pervasive. So I think we need to really stop acting as if we can't talk about death. People get very triggered about the concept that human life ends, but you get 100 if you're doing great. But most of us are doing things that ultimately are going to shorten the human lifespan. And by the way, the earth is about 4 billion years old. So it's going to be here a lot longer than you. However, what we do with this time and how we experience this time, hey, Carolyn from Tennessee, how what we do is so crucial. And this is why we say that most suicide is preventable. Now, let me say that I personally, after having dealt with a lot of patients and a lot of people who are in a space where they want their life to end, suicide is not always uh, a situation where you're like, oh, gasp, this is an emergency. This person is in high level of distress, and that's why they want to end their life. Sometimes it's a very well thought out, like, I am dealing with a life circumstance that is not likely to change, that is causing me great pain. And I do believe in people should be able to die with dignity and choose the way that they make their exit, which I think we still have a lot of work to do on appreciating that concept. But that's not what I'm talking about here today. I'm talking about the kind of situations where suicide is preventable because if we had the will to give the interventions that are clearly necessary, we could prevent most suicides. Most people really need to just be able to talk about things and process it and then have interventions for the bigger challenges that they face in their life. Many times people have come to me and expressed that they feel suicidal, and they kind of expect me to be like, oh my gosh, I'm retired from clinical practice. I think I say that all the time to make sure everybody know it. I know I have no patience. Nobody can get an appointment with me for that type of care. However, about 4 or 5, 6 times a year, I get a phone call out of the blue that somebody that's in crisis, and it's like, okay. I go into the mode. And what I want you to understand is that I don't do anything different than something that you could do when somebody is in this kind of space. And so I'm going to break down for you some ways to approach it so that you can consistently be helpful or useful should you run across that circumstance. Or, hey, this might even be you. And if I'm talking to you and this is you that's in that space, stay tuned because we have more for you. All right. So I want you to know that talking about suicidal thoughts or asking about it does not make people feel suicidal. It doesn't put a thought into their head. There have been study after study after study after study that has shown that you might save their life by asking the important questions. The question that are you feeling suicidal? Are you thinking about taking your life? Or what's talk to me? And inviting that conversation is one of the most important elements to saving a person's life. So just that right there tells them that you're less likely to be judgmental. Now, you may be thinking, if I ask, then I'm stuck. If I say so, I hear this person saying these things. What time is it? Ooh, I'm supposed to be at lunch. I'm supposed to be in a meeting. I have other things. What if they talk for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever long? What if I get sucked into this and I don't get to leave it? These are all fair questions to be asking yourself. I hope that the choice would be to ask the question and make the intervention because that person is alive at that particular moment. And what you don't want to have to subject yourself to is asking all the what if questions that you'll probably have if something goes the wrong way. Okay. If something goes poorly. So understand that when people are suicide is really about a few different things. It's not just one situation that causes a person to get in a mode where they are either passively thinking about suicide, meaning if something happens, it's fine. I hope it does. I wish that I wouldn't wake up. It would be easier if I just expired. Okay. Hey, Michelle, thank you for joining us. So these are that's passive suicidal ideation, and then we have what we call active, meaning now the person is taking action and thinking about what they could do to facilitate it. They may not be, um, you know, they may not be doing something like grabbing a gun or trying to hang themselves or something along those lines, but they may be engaging in behaviors that put them at risk for something happening to them, sort of with a, this is actually probably more common than people think. The I don't care what happens to me attitude. I don't care about this. If something does happen, whatever. There's a lot of people that operate in that mode and do a lot of things because of that type of suicidal thought processes. So you don't have to have uh, a condition or a diagnosis to feel suicidal. I think there's four categories that I think of when I think about people experiencing suicidal thoughts. One is emotional distress. So there's people who may feel depressed at baseline or maybe having some kind of challenge at baseline and then feeling deep sadness and hopelessness and despair. Eventually you can start to feel like, why am I doing this if this is how I'm going to be feeling so often? But certainly there are actually diagnosed mental health conditions that can drive the up and down of the experience of depression or anxiety, having your body and your mind sort of feeling like tormenting you to be keyed up and wired up. Or for many people, substance abuse is far more common than we like to admit in America. We have a cultural commonality of substance abuse. So we get up and we run to our coffee and our caffeine addiction, and we grab our phone addictions and our social media addictions, and we smoke our morning, afternoon, or evening addictions, and we toast our our addictions. And so just understanding that when people come in having uh, suicidal thoughts, they may not even be able to distinguish between the situation that they're living through and the amount of stuff that we pour in our bodies on top of it that make us feel crappy and cruddy. Stressful life events, the third category, a job loss, partner violence, breakup of a relationship, neighborhood violence, uh, poverty, government violence, political violence, laws made that violate your body. These are these are all stressful things that can send people into suicidal thoughts in the suicidal space. And then also we have biological factors. There's family, there's genetics that we inherit that set our body into a space where we automatically are interpreting things with extremes, with trauma lenses. And even in that space, your brain chemistry can become off balance and cause you to have episodes. This is an example. This could be bipolar disorder, where a person may have manic episodes or may have severe depressive episodes. And in those chemical imbalances, think about things that would harm them or not be able to stop thinking and having intrusive thoughts about these things. So I'm just describing that suicidality is a broad, broad word. And that's important for us to understand, because if it wasn't broad, we wouldn't have this problem. And I'm going to need y'all to stop thinking that just because kids are smaller, that they don't feel as much. Kids feel more than you feel because their brains are underdeveloped, and they experience things to the extreme. So if somebody breaking up with you would really, really hurt your feelings, if you're 13, yeah, it'll hurt your feelings, and you might feel like you're gonna die. And even though the parents go, oh, it's just puppy love, no, you can't possibly care that much. That's not helpful, because it's not true. It's counterintuitive to what the child is experiencing. So it's not helpful to tell someone that what they're experiencing should be something different than what it is. Let's stop doing that. Okay. All right. Now, moving forward. This episode of Demystifying Mental Health is called Saving Ourselves from Suicide. SOS. I put the SOS in there on purpose because this is an emergency. Okay. Hey, Phyllis, thanks for joining us today. So, I want to talk a little bit about just my own personal experience with suicide and why I think it's so important for us to be having these conversations, just even beyond me being a psychiatrist. The first time that I experienced someone having suicidal ideation, I was in high school. It was a member of one of my teams, and she called me one day and was like, "I'm about to kill myself and my little brother." And I'm like, "What? I'm 14. I don't know what to do about this." But something in me was like, okay. So I just started talking to her because I didn't even know her super well at the time. And I found out what was going on and why she was upset and what was happening and what she thought was going to happen because of something that had occurred at home while she was babysitting. And she felt like the consequences that she was going to have to live through were not worth it. And listening to her, talking to her, I was able to actually get an adult to intervene and get some assistance and that kind of thing. So it worked out in the end. But I bring that story to you to highlight one really important concept is that most of the time suicidal people are not talking to a psychiatrist. They're not talking to a therapist. They're not probably even in mental health treatment officially. Okay. Most of the time, it's going to be the family members, the friends, the colleagues, the people that you're around that approach you and feel comfortable talking to you or telling you something. And it may just be a lot of times if you're not asking for it, it falls in your lap. Okay. So this is not just training that physicians and mental health practitioners and psychiatrists need. Every human being on earth has a mental health landscape because you have a brain and your brain is taking in information, kicking out calculations left and right all day long. And it's making you do stuff. And it's making you feel things. And it's sending sensations into your body. And it's moving things around inside of you. And then those things come out. We call them thoughts. We call them actions. Actions are words. Actions are movement. Actions are body and demeanor. But whatever it is, it's coming out of your brain. So this means that we have to really be thinking about what circumstances this human being is in that is causing them to feel so agitated, so upset, so hurt, or so damaged by the challenges that they're facing that they don't want to continue anymore. This is a societal problem. Most of the time, when people are suicidal, now there are definitely times where it's medical, where it's chemical, where it's, circumstances that are extremely difficult to predict. But a lot of suicidality is extremely predictable. Stress people out, give them no training about their emotions, give them a bunch of weapons of mass destruction, let them be afraid of each other, and set them loose. Don't take much. keep keep resources from them so they don't really have healthy options and set them up to think that the other people are part of the reason that they're having these feelings and let them go. That's where we are. Now, how do we move beyond these situations where people's environment, their challenges, their fear is that if I continue forward, my life is either going to be psychologically compromised, meaning I'm living in so much pain, whether it's my relationship or it's the I have circumstances I don't know how to overcome. I have life or identity circumstances I don't know how to overcome. If we can create a society that allows us to talk about these things and address them and treat them in a humane, evolved way, then we can prevent these circumstances and we could significantly decrease the number of people that ultimately need this help. So let's dive into the brain and suicidality. When I look at people, I do see them. I see you. Hey, you. Oh, How you doing? I know. You on Earth 2024 is some stuff going on. But when I see people, I wish I could just give y'all my eyes so that you could see how fantastic and amazing you are. The human body and brain is the most advanced technology on earth. It ain't Alexa, it ain't AI, it's not your phone, it's not the satellites and the rockets. It's you. Now, you may not have been taught to think about yourself like that. You probably actually have a lot of words that you use to describe yourself. Do me a favor and just think about those words that you use when I say, well, who are you? What's your identity? You might give your name, but if you had to describe yourself, you're gonna give an ethnicity, not race, human race, one race. It's delusional to think otherwise. And we don't change races either, by the way, because it's just only one race. But anyway, you have an ethnicity, but you also have a culture that you were raised in. You have belief systems that define you. You have people that teach you how to think about yourself. And whether, if you had to describe yourself on paper, I'd encourage you to do this exercise, to sit down. And this is an adjective exercise, I call it. You write out the adjectives that you have used to describe you. And those adjectives may come from other people in their description of you, but just what you think describes you. But I want you to also know that you are a creator. That's what I see when I see you. I see a being that never stops creating from the moment of conception all the way to the moment that your spirit exits this body in this physical realm. That's the time frame that I'm talking about. You are creating. There's not a time where you are doing nothing. It's not even possible. So get that thought out of your mind. Because even when you're asleep, guess what? Your body and brain is doing stuff. It's processing. It's cleaning up the cobwebs. It's taking your experiences from the day and filing it where it's supposed to be so you can remember it. We have some really powerful people that you could see this in real time, that you could have difficulty doing this, right? So this brain and this biology in particular, there's three parts of the brain that I really want to talk about when it comes to suicidality. And those parts are the reticular activating system, the somatosensory cortex, and the brain reward system. Now, the reticular activating system is a part of your brain that filters information from the environment, and it helps draw your attention to one thing or another. If you've experienced something before, now your brain is going to alert to it. Your brain alerts to things that are related to you. That's why you can be walking through the airport and you hear the PA system in the background. But if they call your city or they call your name, your ears tune in. This is how your reticular activating system does with everything in our life. However, when you are going through painful things, your reticular activating system also can exaggerate and twist and highlight experiences, make them louder in your ears, bigger in your brain, higher in your registry. And in doing that, it's actually twisting your reality. If you don't know it's doing this, you're just going to believe it. And unfortunately, when we've experienced a lot of traumatic things, our brain is programmed to look for them, whether we know it's doing it or not. And if we don't have any awareness that our mind can twist information and that we're not just operating fully with objective reality, we think we're right and we're not. And we treat the input from that part of the brain as if it is fact. It is not. We are having difficulty distinguishing feelings that your brain generates based on how it calculates the situation and fact, evidence-based, objective, grounded, studied, and agreed upon data. Okay, so somebody type in the chat for me, feelings are not fact. Type in the chat for me, because that's an important concept to understand when you're understanding that your brain It's going to create a lot of invisible and internal sensations. Some people use the word emotions, some people use feelings. I think those are two slightly different things. Well, they're not slightly different, they're very different, but a lot of times we use those words together. If you are not careful, your default operation mode is in treating your feelings as if they are fact. I know we don't like to admit these things, but doggone it, this is our programming. So if we can learn to control this, we can learn to bring ourselves out of these painful experiences. Number two, your somatosensory cortex. Your somatosensory cortex is the part of your brain that registers pain. I know that's a big word. Somatosensory. Somato means body. Sensory means picking up on what you're feeling. And in fact, man, the human body and brain is amazing. There's a strip of brain that goes across the top of your head, and there is a place on your body, everything from your toes to your scalp is mapped across that brain. Your right side is on your left brain and vice versa. Okay. So if you were, for example, to step on a tack with your left foot, did you feel that? I, I hope you felt it because that was mirror neurons. But anyway, let me stick to somatosensory cortex. Pain is a part of human life. And our somatosensory cortex is the part of our brain that processes what's happening. Okay, she stepped on something. Those cells send a signal like, ah! And then your brain goes, oh, let me move that foot. Let me move my human so that I don't feel that pain anymore. There is almost nothing that our bodies dislike more than pain and fear. Those two, them two things right there are tied very, very, very closely together. And every human being on earth experiences pain and fear. Don't let these songs fool you. I ain't never scared. I ain't never scared. Yeah, I used to sing it too. It's not true. Anyway, point is, we grew up in a world that said stuff like sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Obviously, having a somatosensory cortex, and this is a primitive brain system that's been around for the thousands and thousands of years, the hundreds of thousands of years, the millions of years that humans have been evolving into our current form. We have been able to appreciate pain, and pain moves us. It moves us. It makes us do things without even thinking about it. If somebody slaps you on your shoulder, you might turn around and slap them back before you even think about it because it hurt. And your primitive brain is designed to protect you. We're operating in survival mode because we're constantly being either physically challenged, slapped, addressed, but more often than that, we're getting psychological slaps. I can turn my news on right now. I know something psychologically is going to slap me. So we're experiencing psychological pain far more often than we're experiencing physical pain, but we get that too. Yet we live in a society that completely ignores this. In fact, tells us just keep on going, be resilient. Y'all so resilient, y'all so strong. And they'll be mad when we angry. What kind? Okay, so knowing that when a person feels suicidal, they're experiencing a lot of psychological pain. And that, think of it on a dial. That pain can be like out of 100, 10 to 20, it's a pinch. 20 to 30, it's a punch. 50, 60, I'm in the ring with Mike Tyson, right? Terrence Crawford whooping feet. I don't know. It could be 100. So people are in different states of pain. That's what you're dealing with when somebody is coming to you. And they may be just talking just like this. A lot of people who are suicidal, you can't look at them and tell. They're not living under a bridge. Sometimes the folks living under the bridge are happier than the people who live in embassies and other very high dollar places, right? In the hotels and other things like that. Because when you feel trapped in a situation or a circumstance, feeling suicidal is about having some kind of control, especially when you feel like you have no control over any other stuff going on in your life. Sometimes saying I'm done with it is for them, it's just this one last thing that I can hold on to that I know I have control over. And you know what? I tell them, you're right. You are absolutely correct. That no one can. I can't leave here with you. I can't make you take your medication. I can't make you go to your therapy appointment. You're in America, especially. We have laws about autonomy and a person's ability to choose. And if you want to choose to be unwell, I can hand you a microphone. I wish we'd stop handing unwell people microphones. Message. But since we do, we need to understand what's going on in the brain. So we talked about the somatic sensory cortex. Next, actually, I'm gonna change it. I'm only gonna give y'all three today because this stuff can be a lot, especially when you're just hearing about it. The third brain system you need to know about is the amygdala. The amygdala is the part of our brain that creates all of our emotions. Most of the time, people have heard about it related to fear, fight, flight, freeze. We know those concepts, right? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. However, the amygdala is a fear specialist. Okay, I love the amygdala. Say it out loud. Say it with me. Amygdala. Amygdala. I'm gonna do like one of them little bouncy ball things. Amygdala. Amygdala. Okay. Now, this is probably the most powerful part of your brain that you may not have heard of and don't realize is in there running shows. Okay. Because we just figured out that we all have fear. So, anyway, the amygdala is powerful. It can legit move you if something goes down in your we're living in a day and time where active shooter drills and threats and all these things are happening all over this country. That is traumatizing. It's not just traumatizing to the kids as they have to get locked down over and over again. It's traumatizing to the adults and the parents who care about them, caregivers who care about them. It's traumatizing to our whole population. That's part of why people do it. So understanding that our amygdalas are on heightened mode right now. Our stress levels, our distrust levels are higher than ever. But this is also why it's important to understand that an amygdala storm, because when amygdalas are storming, bad choices are made. Okay, and this is what we're experiencing right now. There's a lot of people who are already, the spring is wound tighter, and then a circumstance happens and that they react. I don't want to use the word snapped. I'm not using meltdown, breakdown, because all of those are non-specific words that are throw them in the trash can. Let's start describing what's actually happening, because this is a mental health problem, and we need objective words and terminology in order to see a problem for what it is. You can't fix something you won't acknowledge, right? You can't fix a problem you won't even name. And our problem is that we have globally neglected our mental health to the point where we are now paying the price for it every single day. We're all paying the price for ignoring our emotions and our ability to control them. And this plays out in a lot of ways in terms of how people struggle with suicidal thoughts. So, in this next section here is about breaking the delusions and building empathy, because the most important thing for us to do is begin to approach mental health differently. And but think about this. Why do so many people struggle with imposter syndrome? Why are so many people, when they get upset or offended, they are ready to throw the whole person away or say something offensive or damaging? We are currently operating in a society that is so separated from each other that we are malfunctioning. That's the only way I can explain it. And I know that sometimes folks get triggered when I say this, because they don't really want to. It's I think the hardest thing that we have to do is look at ourselves and acknowledge ourselves as part of the problem. And I want you all to know that I'm not just the president of Dr. Alauna Trauma Recovery Institute. I'm also my biggest client. I'm telling you that your brain and my brain and the human brain is extremely similar, whether you're male or female or non-binary, doesn't matter. This human brain is very consistent, and it is consistently causing us to deceive ourselves. When I say delusional, delusion is a fixed false belief. Fixed false belief meaning it's not grounded in science, grounded in data, grounded in objectivity. It's just how we feel. Our current default setting, because we don't fully know and appreciate all this brain stuff. I know I've said a bunch of words. You probably like, yeah, what? Yeah, Samantha, so, yo, who the, what? These brain systems have been in operation before you got here. They're going to be in operation after you leave. They are a part of our divine design. However, these primitive brain systems being in charge lead to us thinking and behaving primitively. We we are still operating on some extremely broken concepts about our own selves, about other people, about the way we're still in slavery mentality. We have not dealt when you don't deal with your traumas, they come on forward with you, right? And America has not dealt with one of her biggest traumas is that she is founded on oppression and oppressing whole groups of people and oppressing them as long as possible, as long as it makes money. And we have to deal with this because our society is now shaped around these concepts where trauma is built into the economy. Having these experiences of perfectionism and then failing to be perfect or binary thinking where we just believe anything that the person says that we like how it feels and then we go with it. These are all mental illnesses. These are all conditions of delusion, and everybody has some. There's no one here on this earth has a full 100% ability to appreciate everything that the other 8 billion human beings on earth is going through. It's just not possible. So that is the reason why we need the concept of empathy. Empathy is, sometimes when people use the word, they're referencing being psychologically very keen or aware of emotions, being very connected to someone else's circumstance and situation to where it's very present for you. That is empathy. But I'm going to turn it up to the definition of empathy and give you okay, that was a volume 5. The volume 10 level of empathy is being able to step out of yourself, being able to step out of what you think, feel, believe, your own life experiences, your own brain's conclusion about this thing, and step back and be able to appreciate that somebody else has an experience of things outside of yours. What God is really somebody else, they feel differently about it. Matter of fact, they feel so differently about it, they're thinking so differently about it that there is conflict, there's friction. And oftentimes that is the space where if we can learn to sit when a person is experiencing suicidal thoughts, when a person is experiencing feeling that their life is going in a direction that they don't like and they don't want, if we can sit there with them and hear them out and be able to not make them feel judged, but make them appreciate a world outside of what they can currently see, a lot of times they will find the blind spots. And that's what brings them out of that mode. And it may be just, hey, we got through this moment. We don't have to have the solution for a week, a month, a year from now, but keeping you alive, keeping you here with us, we have another opportunity to learn a new skill. We have an opportunity to apply and get a new benefit. We have an opportunity to become sober. As long as we have another day. And I love, if you all aren't familiar with Twaloha, to write love on our arms, they do great work related to suicidal thoughts and supporting people who are experiencing suicidality. So definitely check out twaloha.org, and we'll put that in the chat. But just understanding that as we are reformatting and update, did you know you're a computer? I mean, not technically, but you kind of are, right? Again, advanced technology. Have you ever gotten to the point where your computer is like, we need to upgrade? Please agree to this upgrade. And you're like, later. And then it pops up again, like, we need to do this upgrade. And you're like, "Ah, later, I'll do it later. And at a certain point, it's like, today, like you have no choice but to do this upgrade. That's where we are. That's where humans are. That's where America is. That's where this globe is, that we are at this point where we must consider that if things are going the way they're going, maybe we're missing something. Maybe there's some other stuff we can do. Maybe, just maybe, there's an opportunity for us to uh, talk about some things in a healthy way that begins to problem solve the issue that we're having. So these last few minutes, I'm going to talk to you about things that we can do to heal, things that can be done to prevent people from acting on their impulses to harm themselves. But I think the most important thing that we do today is just breaking the stigma. I thank you for those who are still here, because this is not something people like to talk about. I love talking about stuff that people don't like to talk about. Let's get it. Because the more we talk about it, the less alone people feel, the better the vocabulary we're able to develop so that we can have these conversations effectively, the more lives we will save, the more children. Right now, we're having a crisis. Our young people are committing suicide at higher rates than ever before. I forgot what the statistic was, but our rates of suicide for Black women and girls aged 15 to 24 have more than doubled over the past 2 decades, according to the American Journal of Psychiatry. Um, the suicide rate among Black adolescents is increasing faster than other racial and ethnic groups. And this is not just a Black thing, because this is also for the first time, Black youth ages 10 to 19 have surpassed the suicide rate of white youth who were previously at the highest rates for the first time since 2022. So that's a huge escalation in the kids that are struggling. And this is even young adults. Like, don't think that when you hit 18, you're just suddenly magically grown. That's not how it works. Our brains are constantly updating and growing and maturing. And so we know that this prefrontal cortex doesn't even reach full maturity until 2025. And that's the part of our brain that we need to rely on to improve our behavior and our ability to regulate these other primitive parts of the brain that I taught you about today. So breaking the stigma allows us to have conversations that we have not been having before. So just by you being willing to talk about it and feeling a little more comfortable broaching the subject, that's going to help you help that next person who's going to help that next person who's going to help that next person. So it's important that when you are experiencing, when someone is experiencing suicidal ideation, that we don't just try to distract them from the problems, but that we really validate what they're telling you. And by validation, I don't mean agreement. I mean, I can see why having 7 or 8 children by different people could be so stressful that you're just over it, right? But right, and not even use the word but, because I don't even like to use that word in those circumstances. Instead of giving the, well, they made their bed, they have to lay in it. That's not that's a response that might commonly be thought of, but that's not going to be the response that's going to validate that person so that they understand. It is hard. I can imagine how difficult that would be to coordinate with all of those people and to have to deal with the repercussions of those behaviors. So allowing them to have their say without making them feel judged is actually a really important part of getting them past the initial, we call it acute suicidality, and then thinking about ways to engage them in things that are about resetting mentally. So if they're grieving, if we're talking about someone that has had a significant loss, like, it doesn't have to be a fast traumatic loss. The person doesn't have to be young in order for a death to hurt, right? There are people who, like, okay, your grandma died, but that might have been the only person that was really supporting you. So just because their parent didn't die doesn't mean that a person may not really struggle after a death and need to process these things. So for a person who may be in that space, we might talk about, how do we memorial for this person? How do we give you some space to honor them? How do we, it might be writing a letter, it might be creating a memorial or an altar, it might be There's people who start nonprofits and do great things in the world because of that thing that caused them such great pain that they thought they would die. Okay. Um, but just overall, any strategy that removes stigma and moves them towards being in a supportive environment is going to help. So if you're directing a person towards, a lot of times people need case management, they need a social worker, somebody to help them identify things that can help them in whatever space they're in, bridge a gap. It might be to get past the rent. It might be to address this thing that is so crucial and help them know how to navigate systems. But many times people could benefit from therapy. I want y'all to know therapy is sexy. Okay? Therapy is the new in thing. Let's make therapy the in thing. I don't even want you. If you tell, oh no, man, I don't do that. Don't come over here with that, because you're not okay. If you're not willing to talk about things and figure out those spaces in your life that you could be doing some work and putting some work in. So please consider talking to a professional. It's not the same thing as talking to your friend, even your wise friend, even your pastor. They have blind spots and they have discomforts, and they don't have the training and the space sometimes to be able to allow what is needed for that deep introspection that therapy brings. And therapy is not just about sitting there talking. We're not laying on the couch anymore talking about our dreams. Therapists are helping people problem solve. They're helping. Sometimes when you tell somebody something and you hear yourself say it, you're like, let me work on that. Okay. So do your work. And another tool to explore is a safety plan. Safety plans, we got out of doing contracts with people that used to do like safety contracts, like sign this contract that you're not going to harm yourself. People sign that contract and did whatever they wanted to do. Okay, that's a thing. Now, who's going to hold you to that? But a safety plan is really about identifying ahead of time the things that help you reset when you're having those tougher days, when you can't get a distressing thought out of your mind, when the intrusive experiences are more than what you can handle. So that might and that's writing it all down on a paper where you can find it and have something to prompt you, because a lot of times things that they're accessible and you don't even think about it when you're in that state of distress. Taking a walk through a forest, or just doing something with other people, or having that one person that hey, I know you understand what I'm going through, so I'll call you in these circumstances, and they agree and they know when I say this word, when I say rabbit stew, that means I'm having a struggle. I need you to talk to me, or whatever that is, right? Thinking through all of these things. Who's my treatment team? Who's my therapist? Who's my psychiatrist? What are the layers? And we can talk a little more about that another time, because I have to close this out. But this is a way of just knowing who and what your team is, so that you can take control of your health or your life, or help that person through that difficult situation. So this has been Demystifying Mental Health. I'm Dr. Alauna. Thank you for joining us today. And feel free to explore my program, The Trauma Cure, that's coming up in October. I hope that you join us, and I'd be happy to teach you more about your brain, body, and behavior. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next fourth Thursday.